Cover 2 podcast coming at you live on a beautiful Wednesday morning, the last Wednesday of April.
Wow.
I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And this is the Cover 2 podcast, like I just said. We're gonna be visiting a couple things today. We got a little bit of the NBA playoffs to talk about. Some series are over, so we'll definitely discuss that, and we'll discuss some of the storylines going on in the NBA playoffs so far. We will also play another game of Cover 5. That's the game where we talk about a subject for 5 minutes and 5 minutes only, so that'll be a little bit later. But Jared, we're going to start off with probably the most popular thing in the sports world going on, and it happens tomorrow, Thursday, the NFL draft. Now, we did our mock draft last week, so we're not gonna kill you guys with a bunch of like an hour of coverage again. We just want to revisit it a little bit and just go over some storylines that have happened last week. Jared, what do you want to talk about first as far as the draft goes?
Obviously, if you're a football fan, especially for the NFL, this is an exciting time of the year. Even if you're a college football fan, because you've probably followed a lot of these college athletes throughout their career, or at least, the last year. And leading up into this draft, this is probably one of the most anticipated NFL drafts in a long time, because there is not necessarily, a clear number one player that's going to go to the Browns necessarily.
Yes.
A lot of people, whether it's reporters, analysts, or just your average fan, think that the Browns are going to take a quarterback. But what quarterback is that going to be? Is it going to be Sam Darnold? Is it going to be Josh Allen? Is it going to be Josh Rosen? Is it going to be Baker Mayfield? Those rumors coming up in the last couple of days. So I think that's really interesting that it's not just like, okay, we know that this one guy is going to go to the Browns, or he's going to go number one overall. I think that kills kind of somewhat of the buzz.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of anticipation going into tomorrow, which I think is definitely a good thing. I know we, like Nick had mentioned, last week we did our mock drafts, and I guarantee we're going to get the majority of them wrong.
Oh,
if I hit on like 5 picks, I think that's a good thing. But no, I'm going to be out at the bar tomorrow night watching it, more than likely, and it's fun, it's exciting. Listen, the NFL season is still months away, but it's kind of just a benchmark of, okay, now we get the draft. Now, this entire pre-draft process of the NFL Combine and pro days and workouts and all that stuff, and now it leads up to this day. And then after this, then the next major thing is teams getting on the field and practicing for OTAs and the mini camps and then training camps. So it's kind of obviously all building up to the regular season, but this is one of the biggest days of the offseason by far.
It definitely is, because there's so much talent that's going to be coming to these teams. It's one of the few drafts where most of the talent will affect the team once they get drafted. Most of these guys aren't getting cut in training camp after. You're picking 7 or maybe more guys in the draft, and these guys are really affecting your teams. There's other sports where you look at it and sometimes the guys don't really affect the teams as much, or you don't get as many draft picks. The NFL draft, I think, is the biggest draft in the world, and I think that's why it gets so much coverage. Now, with that coverage, you get a lot of crazy rumors. You get a lot of mock drafts. We did one for you guys. So you're going to get a lot of differentiating opinions, and you don't necessarily know which one's right and which one's wrong. That makes all the fun of it. But one of the bigger rumors that just came out a couple days ago is that the Browns are actually strongly considering Baker Mayfield as a possible pick for the number one draft. And all we've been hearing, Jared, is that Sam Darnold, number one. Sam Darnold, number one, So this is a little strange to see this rumor come out. I don't necessarily know if it's just someone grandstanding and just saying this because they want to get clicks on their story or whatever, but we got to talk about it. Should the Browns draft Baker Mayfield, or should they draft another quarterback?
Should they draft Baker Mayfield? In my opinion, no. Is it smart for them or whoever came out with this report to say that they're interested in Baker Mayfield? Yes, it is, because if you're the Browns organization, not only do you have the number 1 pick, but you also have the number 4 pick. So you don't want to sit there and tip your card and let other teams know what you're going to do. You want to keep everyone guessing. So yes, and even it doesn't matter if you say, hey, are you thinking about taking Saquon Barkley, number 1? Now they're probably not going to, but you still say, yeah, he's in the running, right? Because if I'm John Dorsey or any important personnel person within the Browns organization, I don't want anyone else really knowing what we're doing. So keep everyone on your toes, and the table is open, whether it's Sam Darnold or Josh Allen or Josh Rosen or Baker Mayfield, anyone. Quentin Nelson, who's a guard, who is probably one of the safest picks in the draft. Obviously, no one's going to take a guard number 1 overall. But, like I said, you want to keep everyone guessing. So, who knows? Baker Mayfield, does he have the talent to go number 1 overall? I believe he does. But I think that Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, and Josh Allen are better quarterbacks than Baker Mayfield. So, for that reason, I don't think the Browns will. But, potentially could they? Listen, if the Browns fell in love with Baker Mayfield, then you know what? By all means, go ahead and do it. And then they get to either, live with the great play or die by the sword.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting that it came out so what am I trying to say? It came out so late in the process, in the draft, the pre-draft process. You know what the interesting thing is? You brought up Saquon Barkley in that discussion. Could they draft him number 1? Well, think about this. I just thought about this in my head right now. I hadn't thought about this before we came on the podcast. What if the Browns draft Saquon Barkley number 1 because they believe Baker Mayfield will drop to their 4th spot? So then they can guarantee both the quarterback that they want and the running back that they want, because the Giants could pick Saquon Barkley. We've seen them at number 2 in that, they might actually draft a running back, because they still do have a quarterback in Eli Manning, and they still do have some good offensive players and guys like Odell Beckham Jr. But that would be interesting as well if we hear that ticker go off and Roger Goodell comes up to the podium and says the Browns draft Saquon Barkley at number 1. I know we're going to yell and scream if that happens, okay? But if that does happen, that might mean that they are okay with dropping back and getting whatever quarterback they get at the number 4 spot. Have you thought about that?
You know what? That's not out of the question completely, and I like where you're going with that. If that scenario does happen, then I think the Browns organization is basically saying, we have vetted every top quarterback in this draft, and we are okay with landing any one of them. Then they're basically saying, we're not going to be picky as far as we want this specific quarterback because of his build or his frame or his throwing accuracy or whatever the case may be. They're basically saying, we will take what is given to us. And I think that also says a lot about Saquon Barkley and how they feel about him. I think the last running back to get as much hype and praise as Barkley was Adrian Peterson coming out of Oklahoma.
Yes.
Back in the mid 2000s. So Saquon Barkley has a lot of hype going on right now. And listen, I mean, would I be surprised? Yes. But who knows? It's the Browns. Okay, it's not like we're talking about another team who has made probably smarter choices over the last couple,
and that's anybody, Jerry.
Right.
Yeah,
this is the team. Browns that we're talking about. So I guess I wouldn't really be shocked if they did anything, especially drafting Saquon Barkley. So who knows? It's in the cards. I wouldn't do that. I would take quarterback first, and guess what? If Saquon Barkley's gone, then you can take Nick Chubb or Quentin Nelson or whatever the guy. I mean, listen, they're going to come out of this first round with at least 2 studs.
Yeah,
and there's been a lot of other rumors that the Browns, because of their million other picks throughout the draft, could jump back up into the first round like they did last year and get 3 first rounders. Ooh. So you never know. But if they do keep their 2 picks, they're going to come away with 2 studs regardless of who they take.
Yeah, and this is like you mentioned, that I think a lot of people are anticipating this draft, because it does seem like, obviously with all the quarterbacks that are going to get drafted early, it does seem like there's quite a bit of good talent. There's not a lot of questions around the top talent like you've seen in the last couple years. I remember last year there was a couple guys that were that were drafted way later than people thought, just because of off the field issues and stuff. It doesn't seem like we have a lot of guys with off the field issues this time. Right. So I think it even makes it more of, if your team is drafting earlier, you're going to get a safer pick than maybe a couple, the last couple years. I remember the Cardinals got Robert Nkemdiche because the guy would drop back all the way to 30. You're supposed to be the number one pick a couple months before that. So, and then obviously we see that Reuben Foster dropped a little bit, and Gary and Conley dropped a little bit because of all the stuff that with them with the off the field stuff. So it does seem like the draft is a little bit safer this year, and I think that's why people are anticipating it. Yeah, you brought the Browns might trade up in the first round again. I would do it. They have so many draft picks. Why not?
Yeah, right. I mean, they did it last year, and they ended up trading back into the late first round and took David Njoku, the tight end out of Miami. So, I mean, they took Jaleel Peppers, David Njoku, and then obviously Myles Garrett. So, two defensive players, and then came back, jumped up and got their tight end of the future. This year, they're more than likely going to get their quarterback of the future, they hope, and then potentially either Saquon Barkley and or Chubb to pair with Myles Garrett. So like I mentioned, I think either way they're going to come out of this with potential superstars. And I remember saying this last year when we were discussing the regular season right before the season started, that the Browns, I knew the Browns weren't going to be a good team, but they're not. I don't think Browns are the crappy team that they've been the last 10 plus years. I think they're starting to finally, come out of that hole. And it's about damn time with the amount of first round draft picks that they've had in recent years.
Absolutely.
It's time for them to start hitting on these picks and not pick Brandon Weeden and fail with that. I mean, obviously when they took Trenton Richardson out of Alabama a few years back, they were thinking he was going to be the running back of the future, and that obviously didn't pan out. So, but yeah, no, I think the Browns are starting to turn the corner, and I think they have a lot more talent on this team than people look at. And, when you say the Cleveland Browns, you kind of automatically just scoff and say, oh, it's the Browns. But I think they're starting to come around. Now, they're not going to, sit here and contend with the Pittsburgh Steelers for the AFC North.
We're saying
division.
they're not going to go 0-16, and they're going to be somewhat competitive.
I could see the Browns getting like 6-7 wins this year and being a somewhat mediocre team. I could definitely see that, But I think the good thing is they're climbing out of that hole, and they're not going to be the crappy dumb team that we've known.
No, I agree with. And the fact that they added Jarvis Landry and Tyrod Taylor and stuff to the roster, everyone forgets we've been talking about Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield. They have Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback. If the quarterback is not ready necessarily for the Browns that they draft, they still have a starting quarterback, a legitimate starting quarterback. So, and then they add obviously Jarvis Landry, and they have Josh Gordon somewhat being added to their team again. They have a pretty good team, and then. You mentioned if they were to add a big defensive player like a Bradley Chubb, maybe with that second pick or something, they'd have pretty good defense too. So I agree with you. Not going to be a playoff team by any stretch, but if you're a fan of the Browns, you're going to see some wins, and you might see somewhat of an upset next year. Think about it as a college football team in a way. You want to go for those wins that are bigger than others, even if your season isn't necessarily you're not making the playoffs or anything. So
right.
I agree with you on that. So nonetheless, let's dive back into the rest of the draft. Anything changed for you, Jared, from last week to make you change any of your picks? You don't have to go through anything, but did anything major happen or anything you heard that makes you want to change a pick?
It's tough because listen, there's so many rumors out there. And I know myself every day I'm on social media looking at different mock drafts, and Todd McShay and Mel Kiper and Daniel Jeremiah and all these reporters who every year, are the supposed professional veteran reporters coming out with their mock draft. So I've seen just about every one of them, and everyone is different. And, there might be I'm just going to take my Cowboys, for instance. Obviously, with the release of Dez Bryant, a lot of people think that they're going to take a receiver with their first overall pick. But also, they have a need at linebacker. They have a need at defensive line. They could go offensive line. They could trade back. I mean, there's so many different possibilities. So, really, it's like you're blindfolded and you're just throwing a dart and you're kind of saying, all right, I think this team is going to get that person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, I will say, I think the New England Patriots are very serious about drafting a quarterback and Tom Brady's eventual successor. I think the issue, and I believe I mentioned this last week when we were doing our mock drafts, that one of the reasons why Jimmy Garoppolo is now with the 49ers and he's not still with the Patriots is because the Patriots didn't have that fifth-year option on Garoppolo. They didn't get him in the first round. And for those who don't know, if you get drafted in the first round, you have your 4-year contract, just like every other rookie that comes in, but you also have a fifth-year option, which the team can choose to pick up if they feel that you're a good player and they want to keep you for an extra year. So that's the benefit of drafting a player in the first round, which the Patriots, like I said, did not do with Garoppolo. So I think this time around, knowing that Tom Brady is 40 and he says he wants to play till he's 45, who knows? I mean, I don't really see that happening. I think he has 2 more, great years left in him, and I think he'll fall off. So if you're the Patriots, I think you need to invest in the future, and I can see Mason Rudolph or potentially Lamar Jackson coming in. So I think that would be, my one and only major change for the Patriots. I had them originally taking, I believe, an offensive tackle since they lost 2 in free agency. But I can really see them potentially jumping up in the draft and grabbing, a quarterback of the future.
Yes. Yeah, so you do think they would trade up?
Yes, I do.
So they'd use those 2 picks to trade up. I believe that could happen too. I wasn't 100% sure on that 5th-year option thing, so I'm glad you cleared that up. And if you just were watching some NFL news, for example, Marcus Peters and Todd Gurley were just signed for their 5th-year option with the Rams.
Yes,
and they're star players.
Right.
So that we're showing you that example of, you have a really good player, you're going to keep
of it paying off.
Exactly. And then that's the risk of taking a first-round pick, too, is that, okay, well, if we actually do succeed on this, we're going to get that guy for next year. We have to pay him and stuff.
And really, the 5th-year option, the benefit of having that is really to have extra time to negotiate a long-term contract. Because for players more so than organizations and teams, players want security. And players don't necessarily want to be playing on 1-year contracts because, like we've mentioned multiple times on the show, in the NFL, contracts are not guaranteed. So if a player is on a 1-year contract and they tear their ACL, basically, an organization can say, hey, we're sorry, heal up, get better, and come back to us, and then we'll talk. To whereas if you sign a 4 or 5 year long-term contract, you will, have some type of security, and you will still have money coming in while you get to, heal and go through rehab and all that. Yeah. So that is, I think, one of the major reasons, and the benefits of that 5th-year option is more time for the player and the team to negotiate a long-term contract.
No, totally. So I think my one change that I think might happen is I've been hearing the rumors, and obviously I follow this team a lot. I follow this team number one. I've been hearing the rumors that the Cardinals might be trading up after all. So that fact of them potentially picking a quarterback could be a lot more likely. I've heard the Broncos. I heard something about the Cardinals asking about the fifth pick. That's legitimate. They asked about the 5th pick from Denver, and Denver's obviously been kind of shopping their 5th pick around because I think they know they have a lot of talent and they can kind of they don't necessarily need a guy or anything like that. But so I think the Cardinals might actually be trading up. If I was a betting man, and you made me bet, hey, the Cardinals going to trade up, or are they going to trade down, or are they going to stay their pick? I think I would have to say trade up now because I've heard a lot of stuff, and so that means the Cardinals might be picking a quarterback. I have them picking Calvin Ridley, so I did have them picking an offensive player, but it's starting to think now that they might actually be jumping up for that quarterback after all. And then with Denver, I believe, or not with Denver, I had Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson going 11 and 12. I'm thinking they might go a little earlier than that.
Really?
As well. Yeah, I just think these quarterbacks have been so much in the news that it's almost going to force a team to pick a guy.
Oh, it will.
You know what I'm saying? It's almost going to be that pressure of if you draft... Now, nonetheless, we were talking about Quentin Nelson. I think he's a great prospect. But if your team does draft Quentin Nelson, you might be a little disappointed if you thought you were going to get a quarterback.
Right.
So I think a team might want to trade up like the Bills or whatever. And if they go and they trade up and they don't draft a quarterback, it's like, what are we doing? So I do think that maybe those quarterbacks, specifically more Josh Allen, will probably get drafted a little higher than I said at 11.
Okay. Now, I wanted to ask you, we've talked in depth a lot about the first-tier quarterbacks,
Yes.
Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, Baker Mayfield. And we have talked about, in my opinion, the second-tier guys, and specifically Lamar Jackson and Mason Rudolph. In your opinion, and I'm not talking about a specific organization, I just want to talk about your thoughts. Who do you feel, or who would you take? Would you take Mason Rudolph if you were on the clock and only those two quarterbacks were left? Would it be Lamar Jackson or Mason Rudolph?
I personally would pick Lamar Jackson because I think he's a game changer, and I do believe that I think someone said that he scored more touchdowns rushing than I think Saquon Barkley did.
Really?
Or something, yeah, something along the lines of that. So he's not your normal running quarterback coming out. This guy is a beast. There's a reason he won the Heisman. So I would go with Lamar Jackson. I'm high on Mason Rudolph, but Mason Rudolph just seems like, I know he doesn't seem like a franchise-changing quarterback to me. I think Lamar Jackson could be that franchise-changing quarterback, and even for a team, if you want to draft a guy like that, he's entertaining to watch. You know, even if the first couple of years or whatever, he's not playing or he does play, he doesn't play necessarily that good for you, it's still entertaining to watch. So I personally, if I'm picking a quarterback in that second tier, I would pick Lamar Jackson. I thought he was going to go number 12. I still think he's going to go a little higher. But I'm still high on Mason Rudolph. It's nothing against Mason Rudolph. I just don't think he's that franchise-changing quarterback like the rest of these guys. And I would put franchise-changing quarterback, I would put Lamar Jackson in that case as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I think there's question marks with both of these players. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, he's the Michael Vick of his generation. He scored more rushing touchdowns than Saquon Barkley, the best running back in this draft. So that tells you something right there. And obviously the questions with Jackson is, his accuracy. Can he, play in a pro-style offense, be under center, and make reads and that type of thing. I agree with you. I would actually take Lamar Jackson as well because I think his upside is greater. There are a lot of people that are high on Mason Rudolph and say that even though coming out of Oklahoma State, he was in the shotgun a whole lot and he wasn't really under center too much. He's a bigger, more prototypical quarterback. I believe he stands like 6'4", 6'5", something like that.
Yeah.
So we can, see over linebackers and defensive linemen. And he's a big guy, so he can take hits. You're not really going to be worried necessarily if he gets clocked. You think he'll be okay with getting up to, whereas Lamar Jackson, he's a lot skinnier and more of an RG3 type build. So if he takes a couple bad hits, you're kind of like, oh boy, is he going to be able to get up from that? The reason why I would take Jackson over Mason Rudolph is because, and I don't mean any disrespect in this, I think Mason Rudolph will end up being like Bryce Petty of the New York Jets.
Yeah.
I feel that they're kind of the same built and more or less the same player, to where Bryce Petty 3 years ago came out of Baylor, was drafted by the New York Jets, and not that many people thought he would be the eventual franchise quarterback of the future, but there is a possibility. But I think it's along those same lines. He comes out of a spread offense just like Mason Rudolph does. They're both big guys and they have strong arms, but they weren't really in pro-style offenses at all. Mm-hmm. Not used to taking snaps under center. And I think there's a big adjustment for them. And I for some reason, I just have a gut feeling that I don't see him being that game-changing franchise guy.
I don't either.
I can see him being a quality backup for a team and coming in, 1 or 2 games out of the year and getting you a win. But if you were sitting here and, relying on Mason Rudolph from day one, I don't necessarily see it. Now, I hope he proves me wrong because, like I said, I don't have anything bad against this guy, and I've seen his college tape, and his stats are amazing in what he did with Oklahoma State. I just don't know if that will necessarily transition to the NFL as well as what Lamar Jackson can do. So I think there's question marks with both players, and, if like I said, if you're the Cardinals or the Miami Dolphins or the Buffalo Bills, who are sitting in that 10 through 15 spot, you're more than likely going to be out of luck, with those first tier quarterbacks. So you're gonna have to ask yourself, are we willing to gamble on the quote unquote second tier guys?
Yeah.
Or do we take another position and, draft a quarterback in next year's draft.
No, totally. And interesting thing. Here's a dumb little thing too. If Lamar Jackson doesn't work out as a quarterback, you can play him as a receiver too.
Oh,
so
boy.
you're kind of getting that 2-for-1. Mason Rudolph, I don't think can transition into a wide receiver. If
I
he
don't
didn't have
think
to.
so.
So if you do want to draft now, I don't think if you're drafting super high, you want to necessarily draft a guy for quarterback and then we're gonna have to play him in another position because he's not good enough at that.
Right.
But there is that chance that if you did draft him, you actually could have a wide receiver on your roster as well. Not really why people draft people, but nonetheless, it could happen. So we're gonna get a break. Coming up next, we're gonna talk a little NBA playoffs. We got some series over. We got some surprises too, and some things to talk about for the NBA. So we'll be right back on the Cover 2 podcast.
JR runs the spot. Gives it up. George Hill fires. Rebound. LeBron James says, I'll take that. And he was fouled and then tackled by Stevenson. So give Stevenson the sack as well as the foul call.
Right now, he's having a tough time.
Did he pull him down? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, I mean,
Hit him by the shoulders.
The Pelicans fly into the Western Conference semifinals. A stunning sweep. And the Warriors are bound for the second round.
That's it. The process continues. The Philadelphia 76ers will advance. Now they await Boston or Milwaukee.
Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio. Once again, I'm Jared Smith.
And I'm Nick Nina.
And we're coming at you with an NBA segment now, talking a little NBA playoffs. We're going to basically stick with the 3 series that are now over and give our thoughts and opinions on those. Since there are other multiple series going on, we don't want to necessarily speculate as to what's going on. I will say there's been a lot of parity in these NBA playoffs, a lot more than we anticipated originally. I know when we were kind of giving our picks as far as who we think was going to advance and win, for the last couple of years, it's really been the Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it's kind of been, we know these two teams are going to get to the finals. It doesn't really matter about any of these playoff teams or playoff matchups. We can't say that about this year. There have been upsets. There have been a lot more closer matchups than we expected. With the Pacers evening their series with the Cavaliers at 2-2. But like I said, for this segment, we're going to stick with the 3 series that are over. So the Warriors beat the San Antonio Spurs in 5. I think Nick and I both agreed that was going to happen, especially with the Spurs not having Kawhi Leonard. Probably one of the bigger upsets, you could say. The Pelicans, with Anthony Davis leading the way, sweep the Portland Trailblazers. That, to me, was a little interesting. I felt like Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, and that Blazers team was a lot better than how they played in this round, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see if that team stays together, if they break apart now, because they've been together for a few years and they haven't really been able to do anything in the playoffs. So that's an interesting thought. We'll get to that later. But I wanted to start with, in my opinion, the most impressive team so far in the playoffs, the Philadelphia 76ers, trusting the process, and now it is paying off as they beat the Miami Heat in 5. Nick, I want to get your thoughts on the Sixers.
Yeah, it's great for Philly because they go from being the laughingstock, the Cleveland Browns of the NBA in a way the last couple of years where they were losing on purpose. They were saying that they weren't really trying. This whole trust the process thing was essentially them saying, we're just going to throw a bunch of players in the court and see what happens. And, we're going to be in the top 5 for draft picks every year. And it worked. Not only did they win 50 games, which astounded me this season, didn't think they'd get close, but now they've won their first playoff series in dominating fashion. There was no way they were going to sweep the Heat. The Heat are a good team. They're a veteran team. When you got a guy like Dwayne Wade on the team, you're probably not going to get swept, and that's not what happened, but they still did win in 5. And yeah, Philadelphia's really, really impressed me. Ben Simmons has looked like a monster in these playoffs so far. Joel Embiid, in the games he's played, has looked good. Obviously, he's wearing that mask, so it makes him look even a little more menacing on the court, besides his 7-foot, 300-pound frame. But it really just does seem like the 76ers team is going to be a force to reckon with in these playoffs. And like you had said to begin this segment, there's a lot of parity in the NBA, and a lot of these Eastern teams that we thought were going to, kind of run through the gauntlet might not actually be running through the gauntlet anymore. So the 76ers might be one of those teams that gets in, and we mentioned that the way the bracket is going to come out of the East, the 76ers are going to avoid both Toronto and Cleveland in the second round. 76ers right now, they look really good. And if I had to pick right now, I think they're going to get to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think they are.
man.
I think they're a very, very good team. They have Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. They had a guy like J.J. Redick in the offseason. They still got solid players like Robert Covington and Dario Saric. I think they're a good team, and they impressed by beating the veteran Miami team.
They did, yeah. And the thing is, they have so many young players on their roster. I mean, yes, they do have a couple veterans, I guess you could say, with J.J. Redick. Really, I think he's the most veteran player on this team.
Oh, yeah.
And I think one of the only players who has even been to the playoffs in his career. So, for obviously Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, the two stars of this team, they're, in a sense, fresh rookies when it comes to the playoffs, and we saw what they did in this first round. So I'm still hoping to see that Cleveland Cavaliers-Sixers matchup. I want to see them go up against an ultra-talented, Cleveland team with LeBron James, obviously the best player in the world. So I think that would be fantastic. But I know you have to give nothing but credit to the Sixers for what they did. Now, listen, Miami, the Heat are not, some powerhouse team. So it's not a complete surprise to see the Sixers play well and win this series. But I think it's good because, in my opinion, these are the guys, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, these are going to be the future of the NBA. And so I like to see when young talent, kind of rises to the top and, shows us what they can do. Like I said, it's been so much about LeBron James and the Cavaliers and kind of the same old song that it's cool to see these young guys stepping up and making names for themselves, because in my opinion, this is where your legacy really lies. It's one thing to have a great regular season and great stats and make the All-Star team and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, I think you are remembered by what you do in the playoffs, because that's really what matters.
Yeah.
Right? You could be a fantastic All-Star player, all-world, on a horrible team and never make the playoffs. And yes, you will be remembered, but you're not probably going to have any championships. And at the end of the day, I think that's what these guys play for. So I'm really excited for the Sixers team. I'm happy that they were able to advance. I'm not sure who they would play in the second round, so we're not going to sit here and speculate that.
Yeah.
But I think it's great to see this young team playing so well, and I'm excited, and I hope that they make it at least to the Eastern Conference Finals, because I'm leaning more towards them making it to the finals.
Yeah, no, that would obviously be crazy if they made the finals, but not totally out of the question anymore. So now, Jared, real quick, one other question for you: do you think the youth, because I like the youth, but do you think the youth might actually end up coming to bite them in a later series? Do you think that would be their ultimate kind of downfall, them being young, or do you think the NBA is different nowadays where being young doesn't necessarily matter as much?
No, I think experience, you always need some type of experience, and totally. That's why they don't have as much, with really only J.J. Redick being one of the only guys off the top of my head that I can think of who has playoff experience, and I think that would really come into play if the Sixers went down in a series like 2-1 or 3-1 or something like that, to where it's like, okay, we're facing adversity, our backs are against the wall, how are we going to fight and climb out of this? I think if they're up 2-1 or up 3-1, it's just going to be like, all right, it's just a party. This is what we've been doing. That's what they did to the Heat, so why not continue to do that again? But I think that we will really see what this team is made of if they get down in a series. I think that's where adjustments come in, because obviously when you face a team for up to 7 games, you have to make some type of adjustments. Usually the first game is kind of the feel-out game, seeing what another team is going to do. And then the second, third game is really about making adjustments. How are you going to react to what the other team is doing? So can the Sixers make those adjustments in Game 2 and Game 3 and not get themselves into a hole where they have to, climb out of being down a game or two in a series. So, I don't see this team doing that because I think they have too much talent, and but you never know. If they get down in a series, we'll see, that lack of experience. We'll see if that hurts them or if it's not a big deal.
No, totally. All right, so let's advance to the two other Western Conference matches we're going to talk about. And actually, what's cool about this is that these teams the winners of the series are going to play each other. So we can actually somewhat predict the next round as well with these series. And we just mentioned it. Pelicans blow out the Trailblazers in their series 4-0 sweep. And the Warriors get the job done against the Spurs in 5. It was going to be hard for anybody to say the Spurs were going to get swept. So they win that one game, and then they're moving on. So let's talk about the Pelicans and well, actually, you know what? Let's talk about Warriors and Spurs first. Did you see anything in that series that made you have any concern about the Warriors, or did they kind of just flow?
No, not necessarily. I think this was in my opinion, one of the more, I don't like to use the word boring, but just not a whole lot of excitement.
Well, because we know what was going to happen.
Right.
That's why.
You know, with the Spurs not having their best player, and in my opinion, one of the top 5 players in all of basketball, and Kawhi Leonard, out, it just really didn't make for that much of a competitive series. Now, obviously, the Spurs did win one game in San Antonio, but I think that was just, that wasn't really too much to think about or read into. The Warriors, I think they understood that they were going up against an undermanned team in the Spurs, and they didn't really have to do too much to get the victory. Obviously, without having Stephen Curry, other guys had to step up, but it wasn't really that much of a challenge for them, and I think they were more in a sense, just skating by, ready to get into the next round. Now, this second round matchup with the Pelicans is going to be a little more difficult than the Spurs. You have Anthony Davis, who's playing like an elite all-star player right now, and he has been his entire career. It's just the unfortunate fact that he plays in New Orleans, so he doesn't get the publicity or the coverage that I feel that he deserves. But this Pelicans team is very, very good. I don't think that Stephen Curry will be healthy enough to play in this series.
Yeah.
Now, I haven't heard that he's been ruled out, but the way that Steve Kerr has been talking in interviews, it seems like he's going to need one more series of rest before he comes back. So this will be more of an interesting series. I think the Warriors will still win, but I think that the Pelicans can squeak out 2 victories against the Warriors.
Well, before we start predicting that series, let's go.
Sorry, I know
let's talk about the Pelicans and Trailblazers. But I think there's 2 sides to this. One, you have the Pelicans looking really, really good, way better than they did during the regular season. And then you have the Trailblazers, who looked really, really good. I thought they were this was like their year to potentially get, deep in the playoffs, potentially take advantage of a Warriors team that was not, that was without Curry. Because imagine this, like we're saying, the Pelicans have moved on to play the Warriors. So the Trailblazers, if they would have won this series, would be playing the Warriors. And I thought that matchup, without Steph Curry to be able to guard, the 2 guards in McCollum and Lillard, it was going to make it very, very interesting. Well, they completely crapped the bed, okay? And they looked terrible, and they got blown out a couple of the games, too. And it's just disappointing. And you mentioned the fact, hey, are they going to break up this team? Maybe you have to. Maybe the coach needs to be fired or something like that, because you cannot be the 3rd seed most of the season, in the Western Conference and just totally blow it at the end of the playoffs. You don't get swept. It's not like they had injuries where there's actually a reason. No, there's not a reason. The Trailblazers did not look good, and I do believe there needs to be a change. And whether that means split them the team or firing the coach, something needs to happen in Portland, because that can't happen again.
No, listen, if I'm Damian Lillard, I'm pretty pissed, pretty upset, pretty frustrated, and tired of not, really taking that team to the next level. He, in my opinion, has been an all-star snub for the last couple of years, and he's another player that I think because of the city and the organization that he plays in, doesn't necessarily get the respect that he deserves. I think he's an all-star point guard, and he's a player that can help lead a team. He obviously needs other pieces around him, and I'm not necessarily sure that the Blazers have been able to put those pieces around him. So if I'm Damian Lillard, I'm seriously considering leaving the Blazers when my contract is up and going to another team, unless they're willing to make the sacrifices as far as being serious about bringing another all-star in, whether it be going after LeBron James or Kawhi Leonard or Klay Thompson or something like that. I think CJ McCollum is a great scorer, but I don't think he's in that elite conversation as those players that I just mentioned. So I think the Blazers need to get another all-star / superstar to pair with Damian Lillard to make him happy. Because like I said, right now, I don't think he is happy, and if I were him, I would just get tired of losing. Like, you're making all the money in the world. That's fantastic. You're in a great city in Portland, a great fan base. But, you know, what are your priorities? I feel that his are now about winning. He's been in the league long enough to where it's not really about money anymore. He's not a young guy. He's a veteran, and he really hasn't won. I think it's time for him to start winning.
No, you make great points, and you look at teams around the league that are dominating, and you look at Houston. They have 3 real good players. They have Paul, Harden, and I would put Clint Capella up there too. He's a pretty solid player. They also have great players around them. The Warriors obviously have 4 stars. The Cavaliers have multiple stars. The Toronto Raptors, I almost said the Blue Jays. Toronto Raptors.
Nick's over here thinking about hockey.
The Toronto Blue Jays. Oh, I just said it. That's
wow.
unbelievable.
Now we're on baseball.
Sorry, the Toronto Raptors have a bunch of stars. So you're right. They need to add that third guy, and I think Lillard's the only real superstar on that team. McCollum's an expert at his position, but not necessarily a superstar. I know he's made an All-Star game and stuff or whatever, but still, he's not that star player. So I do agree with you that they need to do something because you need to keep Damian Lillard. And I actually compare them a little bit to Oklahoma City, because Oklahoma City could have. Russell Westbrook could have got frustrated there and left, especially after Durant left and all that stuff. But he stayed. So Portland needs to make that kind of pitch to Damian Lillard and get some stars, just like the Thunder did.
Right, with Paul George. And
exactly, Carmelo Anthony. And although that's not necessarily working out in this playoff so far, it still is it's hey, Russ, we want you. We want to actually compete, all that stuff. I'm not saying Damian Lillard's as good as Russ Westbrook either, but he's still a star. So now let's look at the Pelicans side of it. No DeMarcus Cousins, and they still sweep the Portland Trailblazers. They have a funky, interesting team. They have playoff Rondo has showed up again. I mean, literally the guy doesn't seem to care until the playoffs start.
Right.
Drew Holiday has really played well. This is his first season where he's really come out to be a very, very good player.
And been healthy.
Exactly. You also have Anthony Davis, of course, and Nikola Mirotic as well. Very solid player on this team. This team, obviously underrated. We were talking about you were saying that you think the Warriors will win. Man, if they don't have Steph Curry for that entire series, and the Pelicans steal some games, you never know. I'm not out here saying.
I think you are.
That the Warriors are. I'm not here saying that the Warriors are going to lose the next series.
I think you are.
But you never know.
Oh. Wow.
You never know. Well, here's the thing.
You're not willing to completely jump off the boat.
No, because I'm not saying that the 76ers are 100% going to get to the finals. That I'm saying there's a chance, but they're probably not going to be. And I think there's a chance that the Pelicans could somehow beat the Warriors. And you never know with injuries and stuff. Something could happen in the series as well. Like KD could go down or something like that. But I think without Steph Curry, this team is not the same. They're not the same Warriors that they were without Kevin Durant. When they had the 3 stars with Curry, Draymond, and Klay, I think they are a better version of the Warriors than the Warriors right now with KD, Draymond, and Klay. I just think Curry means a little more to that team. Obviously, he's the point guard and all that stuff. But I think he's more the lifeblood of the team. I think without him, and not even having him on the court, even if he's somewhat injured, not even having him out there on the court, I think does affect them a little bit. I do not think the Warriors will lose that series, but I think they're going to be kind of damaged a little bit. They're going to have to really fight and claw. Because this Pelicans team, I wouldn't be saying this unless they destroyed the Portland Trailblazers in that series.
Right, they did. My take is going to be a little more simplistic. It's very simple. The Pelicans, like you mentioned, they destroyed the Blazers and made the Blazers look silly. The Pelicans are a great team. If they had DeMarcus Cousins, I would put them a little higher on the depth chart. As far as teams go, Anthony Davis is a superstar. Drew Holiday, I'm very happy for him coming off injury. He's playing really well. Rajon Rondo, like you mentioned, the playoffs come.
We know what he can do in the playoffs.
Right,
yeah.
a light clicks in his head and he starts to play well. This team is playing very well right now. The Warriors still have multiple superstars on their team.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Steph Curry's missing, and obviously he's a big part of their team. They still have Kevin Durant. They still have Klay Thompson. They still have Draymond Green. The Warriors, if they're clicking on all cylinders, should not have too much of an issue.
But they're not clicking on all cylinders right now. That's
No.
what I'm saying.
Even without Steph Curry, this team can still go out there and beat any other team on any given night. So I think if the Warriors are doing what they're supposed to be doing, like shooting well and defending like we know they can, I don't think this should be much of a series. I know I said that I think the Pelicans can get 2 games, but they can extend the series to 6. But I really think that if the Warriors, have their heads screwed on straight and aren't thinking past the Pelicans to the next round and they're just focusing on the now, that it really shouldn't be too difficult to beat the Pelicans. Now, like I said, I'm not trying to throw shade at the Pelicans, but I think Anthony Davis is their only all-star. Yeah. And they're playing well right now, but when you go up and you face a team that has 3 all-stars on it, and not just all-stars, potential superstars, and then you never know. If the series does get extended to 5, 6, 7 games, maybe Steph Curry does come back for the end of the series.
True.
So then you add another superstar to that, right? I think there's too much talent on the Warriors for this Pelicans team to handle.
Let's say this. I want to give you a little scenario here. Let's say this series starts. New Orleans takes game 1. Right? Shocksboro. Game 2. New Orleans takes game 2. Somehow they find a way.
Wow.
Then what happens? Then would you change your mind?
Then you can start pushing the panic button.
Okay.
Because that would be 2 wins on the road.
Yeah, but then all New Orleans really has to do is win 1 more game at home, and there's a very good chance they win that series. So that's all I'm saying. I'm just saying there's a chance.
I guess that's why they play the game.
That's true. Yeah, but the NBA seems like the last couple of years where it doesn't matter if you play the game.
Right.
I'm just saying, and we talked about this at the very beginning of the segment, there's a lot of parity. And maybe this is the year where the Warriors screw up and don't play as well and actually get eliminated earlier, before they even play that potential matchup with Houston later.
The only way I see that happening is if the Warriors, and I'm not saying that they completely, just overlook the Spurs, but if they have that mentality of, we know we're better than this team.
Totally, yeah.
We can just come out and, we're going to beat them because we're more talented. If you have that type of mentality, yes, then I think your scenario of the Pelicans coming in and winning those first 2 games is more likely. But like I mentioned, if the Warriors have their heads screwed on straight, like I think they do, even without having Steph Curry, the Warriors team is more talented and should be able to beat and handle this Pelicans.
Yes, but I'll be praying that this Pelicans thing happens.
It would make for a lot more interesting talk next week.
Oh yes. But so, nonetheless, one more little topic in the segment. The series isn't over, but I think we got to talk about it. Cleveland Cavaliers struggling against the Indiana Pacers. Now, it doesn't even matter necessarily to me if the Cavaliers win this series. It's the fact that they're struggling with the Indiana Pacers, who are not a world beater of a team. So, Jared, I'll get your take on this first. What do you think is going on with the Cavs, and do you think we've been obviously talking about that? I mean, we've talked about them so much on this podcast this year. But do you think that this is the final nail in the coffin in a way of saying that this Cavaliers team isn't the best team in the East?
I think they're proving that they are not the best team in the East by their play. We don't have to. I mean, that's not very hard to see, at least for me. Yes, they're still talented. You have the superstars with LeBron James and Kevin Love, but they're proving that they don't deserve to be called the best team in the NBA or even the best team in the East right now. And that's not trying to throw any shade at the Pacers, but the Pacers shouldn't be tied 2-2 with the Cavaliers right now. Now, that you could say that's a lot of different reasons. You could say it's on LeBron James because he's not doing enough to get his other teammates involved. You could say it's on Tyronn Lue for not having as good of a rotation and not potentially having J.R. Smith start instead of coming off the bench. I mean, there's a bunch of different scenarios. You could flat out just come out and say, this team isn't playing well because even though going back to the midpoint in the year when they traded for Jordan Clarkson, Rodney Hood, George Hill, and Larry Nance Jr., even though, in the beginning that seemed to work out great, those players, I think, are still adjusting. I mean, they've only been with this team for half a season. And now that the playoff time comes, things are obviously a lot more, a lot more serious. Like you don't want to cause a turnover, so you might, play a little more tight or not as loose. So who knows? I think there's a lot of different reasons why. But in the end, no, right now, I don't trust this Cavaliers team to make it to the finals. And if they do, something's going to have to change, and I think it's going to have to start with LeBron James.
Yeah. No, I agree with that too. And I do think, obviously, you see Lance Stevenson coming back and doing his thing a couple years later. But even, like look at this. They, in this series so far, have lost 2 games, and LeBron had to score almost 50 points in one of their wins. So there's a chance they could have lost 3 already this series. So, man, I don't think this Cavs team is nearly as good as it has been the last couple of years. I agree with you. I think they're showing that they're not the best team in the Eastern Conference. We need to go to break. Coming up next, we got a little Do You Care coming up next. So that is on the other side of the break of the Cover 2 podcast.
John last night got on board twice, a single and a walk, had 2 stolen bases, scored a run. Swing first pitch, the sky went out toward deep right field. Moving back on it is Reddick, drifting at the wall, climbs the wall, not going to get it. Big fly for Mike Trout, and the Angels strike early. It's 1-0.
Well, you talk about liking a pitch, going after it on the first pitch. He liked it and hits it out. His 10th home run of the season for Mike Trout. 18 RBI. Great game plan there for Trout. Got the pitch he liked and hit it out.
Krug a drive. Hop to the corner. It's going to take 7. In the regular season, the Bruins won 50 games. The Maple Leafs won a franchise-high 49. And in this series, they have both won 3. Something seemingly poetically just about it, unless you're sitting in New England or a fan of that team right now, because they had a 3-1 series lead.
Why doesn't Pete Carroll in Seattle, why don't they just pull the trigger on Colin Kaepernick and just stop this? Either, it's like, hey, we haven't ruled him out. We're going to bring him in. We're not going to, what are we waiting for here?
Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio, and it is time for Do You Care?
Do You Care?
I had to get it in before Nick did because I knew his was a little more. I was
going to yell.
It was. Yeah, you've actually been a little more tame the last couple shows with your Do You Care?
I don't know. I don't know why. Maybe it's because we've been kind of haven't had as much news in Do You Care.
Oh, okay.
Possibly.
So Nick's a little down on our Do You Care news.
Yeah, well, I'm high on everything else we've been doing, like the mock drafts and obviously the playoffs and all this stuff. But you know what? Just because you said that, next week I'm going to explode.
All right.
I'm just gonna.
So turn the volume down.
Exactly.
When we start
100%.
Do You Care.
Yes.
Or you're going to get your eardrums blown off. Nick, you get the first question today. Do you care that the Seattle Seahawks are still contemplating signing Colin Kaepernick?
Yes, I do care, because I think this is maybe a little bit the first sign that he might actually he signed, because it seemed like the last year, this tumultuous year for Colin Kaepernick, has been the team will say, oh, there's a rumor that they're going to sign him, and then it's no, he's and we heard this. I forget who it was a couple weeks ago. It might even been Seattle for this case, where they said, okay, we want to bring you in, but are you going to kneel for the anthem? And once he said, yes, 100% I intend to do that, the team said no. I can't remember exactly which team it was, but that's what happened. And that has kind of been the theme. It's well, we want you. We think you can play in the NFL. You obviously have more talent than a lot of the backups in the NFL. But the fact that you're going to cause this controversy that might alienate some of the fans, we don't want you. So I think with Seattle still contemplating Kaepernick, even though there's been all these, all this stuff about him, I think this might be the first sign that he will get signed. There's a slim chance. I still think there's a slim chance because I just think he's kind of ostracized himself unjustly in with these NFL owners and all this stuff. And I think it's hard for anyone to get signed when you're suing the owners as well. But nonetheless, Seattle, who's been a team with a lot of guys that have been fighting for the same thing Colin Kaepernick has been fighting for, guys like Michael Bennett, guys like Richard Sherman, although they're not on the team anymore, Seattle's been kind of that team with the social issues. They've been up front with the social issues. So I think Seattle would be a great fit for Colin Kaepernick. Obviously, he wouldn't start because you have Russell Wilson there, but I think he would be brought on with open arms from Seattle, and I think if there's a team to sign him, it is the Seattle Seahawks. Jared, do you care that Dwayne Wade might have played his last game?
I do care. Dwayne Wade coming off of his 15th NBA season, coming out of Marquette, was always known as a slasher, not really the best shooter, but a guy that would go and, he could probably average double-doubles, at least 20 points, 10 rebounds. But he was a guy that he was going to be a good guy in the locker room, and he was going to go and, get a lot of and ones, and he was going to be a slasher and that type of guy. Well, over his career, he's refined his shooting game. He's been more than just a leader. He has led teams to 3 NBA championships, all with the Heat. Played his first 13 years with the Miami Heat. Then he's from Chicago, and I believe in his heart always wanted to play for the Bulls. Finally got the opportunity to do so in 2016-2017 season. That did not go well at all. Not at all. As the Bulls team was horrible, and that's like being very generous and nice to them. He then signs a 1-year deal at the beginning of this season with the Cavaliers to once again team up with LeBron James. And at first it was like, oh man, like these guys are back at it again. We saw what they did when they paired up last time in Miami, winning 2 championships in 4 years. This team on paper was looking really, really good. And then it was kind of a downfall. Wade was in the starting lineup in the beginning, and then J.R. Smith was not happy about that. So Wade, because he's just this kind of cool of a guy, says, hey, I will come off the bench to kind of make the team better. In the end, Wade is always going to be known as a Miami Heat, and around the trade deadline was traded back to Miami for the second half of this season. So, like I said, a 3-time champion, in my opinion, a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I hope it isn't his last time playing, because I think he still has something left in the tank. But at this moment in time, he said he's not thinking about that right now. He wants to take some time in the offseason, be with his family. You don't want to make any kind of rash decisions coming off a loss in the playoffs.
Yes,
Your emotions are kind of running a little bit high. So get away from basketball for about a month or so, and I'm sure we will hear some news. But I hope this isn't the last that we've seen of him, because I'd like to see him in the league for a couple more years. I think he's got more left in the tank. Nick, do you care that the Maple Leafs and Bruins is going to a Game 7?
Yes, I do care, because it's interesting. If you remember, Jared, I was talking about how the last time these two teams played in the series, they went to Game 7, and Toronto had a 4-1 lead in the game. I believe it was even in Boston, too, and blew it. They gave up 3 goals late. Boston tied the game 4-4, and then they lost a heartbreaker in overtime. And it was the first time Toronto had been in the playoffs in a long time, so it was a big deal, and it was the collapse of the Maple Leafs again. So this time, it's a little different, because I think that series was a little more even throughout. This series it really should be over by now. I don't know how Toronto's done it, but nonetheless, they're getting to a Game 7. They win a great game last Monday. Obviously, a horrific tragedy happened in Toronto before the game even started. So the fans were kind of on edge, and the team was playing with heavy hearts. But man, they're going to a Game 7. This Bruins team looked really good during the regular season, but if I had to pick, I think Toronto's actually going to get it done. I think they're going to come down from 3-1, and they're going to win this series. They're going to avenge that horrible loss they had a couple years ago. And I think they do it. I think Toronto advances, and it's going to be a great story for the NHL. It's a great story for Canada, because Canada hasn't been on the top as far as teams getting to the Stanley Cup and stuff like that the last couple of years. So the further you see the Canadian teams advance, the little more fun the crowds get as well. So that's going to be great. Jared, do you care that Mike Trout now leads the MLB in home runs with 10?
I don't necessarily care. I think it's great, not only for Major League Baseball, but for Mike Trout and the Angels organization. But this isn't breaking news to me. Mike Trout is, in my opinion, the best baseball player in the world right now. I think him and Bryce Harper are probably the top two, definitely the faces of MLB right now. But, it's just like, this is what Trout does. This is what I would basically expect from Mike Trout. And I think the other great thing that we can tag along with this is that the Angels are playing really well. They've beaten the Houston Astros the last 2 games, and I believe right now they've got a day game going on with the Astros. But the Angels are sitting at 16-8. I believe they are technically right now in first place in the AL West, because
they beat Houston twice.
Yeah, and the Astros are at 16-9, so the Angels are a half game up right now. So I think that's the more important thing when talking about this team. Like I said, I'm not saying that I expect Mike Trout to lead the major leagues in home runs for the rest of the season, but is it out of the question that he can be in the anywhere from the 30 to 50 range in home runs? Not at all. He's a 5-tool player, and this is what we expect from great players. So, like I said, I think the more interesting thing about this team is that they're playing really well, and it starts and ends with Mike Trout. Nick, last question, sticking with baseball. Do you care that the Atlanta Braves are calling up Ronald Acuna?
Yes, I do care. This guy's a stud. This is the next big MLB prospect to come up. Obviously, the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of guys come out and play well. And the MLB's kind of had this rejuvenation of rookies coming up and these top prospects coming up and playing well. And Ronald Acuna, he's going to be just that. He's an outfielder for Atlanta. And this Atlanta team, man, they're an interesting squad because they still have stars like Freddie Freeman and Dansby Swanson, but they have so much young talent. They have one of the best organizational teams in the whole thing, in the MLB. So they have a lot of organizational depth. That's what I'm trying to say. So even though they got caught with a couple of they got caught in the offseason illegally getting some international players, this is how good their system was. They still have one of the top systems in baseball, even though they got a bunch of players taken off their team. So nonetheless, Ronald Acuna was not taken off. It was not taken out of this organization, and he's not getting called up. And I'm telling you guys, this is a must-watch guy. This is going to be one of the top guys in the MLB for years to come, and I'm excited to see what he does.
How long was he in the minors? Do you know? Is he?
No, not necessarily. I think he's an international player, so he's been in the minors. He could be in the minors a lot longer than, let's say, a guy drafted out of the United States.
Okay.
Because if you can remember, Julio Urias from the Dodgers was signed when he was 15. Was in the organization for a while, and I think he's still only 21 or whatever, and he's, it seems like he's been here forever. So Acuna, I believe, is in the low 20s. He's played enough to finally get up, and he's going to be a real fun player to watch. All right, that's Do You Care section. Coming up, we're going to play a little Cover 5. So that'll be on the other side of this break. This is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
There has been a lot of speculation around my whereabouts this offseason and what's next for me. That's why I'm here today to clear that all up. Today, I'm a Monster Energy Supercross rider at a place I know well, Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts.
Do you plan on attending the optional workouts that are upcoming?
No.
Why?
I got dirt biking skills.
Puck goes into the corner. Schmidt goes there and pins it. Time winding down here. And they're going to run out of time. One last chance. Downey, no! It's a Vegas jackpot! History made by the Golden Knights!
What a performance.
1 year ago today, this group didn't exist.
Ducks need to get out of the zone. 5 seconds. They've done it. The San Jose Sharks make quick work of Anaheim. They sweep the series and advance to take on Vegas in round 2.
Got 2 podcasts back here on OC Rock Radio. It's time for the final segment of the day. We're going to do a little Cover 5. Jared, if you don't know what this segment is, we've done it a couple times here on the podcast. We're just going to cover topics that we pick. It can be anything from any sport for 5 minutes and 5 minutes exactly. So, Jared, we're going to start with, I'm just going to pick one random one. We're going to pick with the MLB. So put 5 minutes on the clock right now if you're playing at home. The Los Angeles Dodgers are playing a lot better. Obviously, if you are a baseball fan, you know that they started the season kind of a little rocky. At one point, they were 4-9, and now they're getting back into their groove. Kenley Jansen's throwing the ball a little harder. The Dodgers are starting to actually get hits and score runs in games, and they're just playing a lot better. And that culminated this weekend with a series win over the Washington Nationals, which included Clayton Kershaw defeating superstar pitcher Max Scherzer in their big-time matchup on Friday night. So, Jerry, I'll let you start. What do you think about the Dodgers kind of improving this season?
They are. I mean, they're sitting right now 500 at 11-11, and you're right. They have played better, and record-wise, they have. I mean, they sweep the Padres. The Padres aren't really that good of a team. We all know that. They take 2 out of 3 against the Nationals, which I think was pretty impressive. And then, they lost last night to the Marlins 3-2. I still think they're kind of up and down. I think mediocre is probably the best word to describe this Dodgers team right now. So I guess you could say they're out of the slump that they started in to begin the year. But I'm not going to sit here and say that, I don't know, this team is, clicking on all cylinders or anything like that. I mean, their depth shows that they should be better than 11-11. Mm-hmm. And I mean, their talent-wise, they are a better team than what their record shows right now. And I think it's still very, very early in the season, but I'm not ready to sit here and say that this team is going to overtake the Diamondbacks right now, who are sitting at 16-6. They look like a legitimate team right now. Obviously, things could fall off. Who knows? But for the Dodgers, at least, I'm not ready to sit here and completely jump on this team's bandwagon. I think, I don't know, right now they're mediocre at best. I don't see them, and I think it's a mixture of both things. They're hitting more so than they're pitching, because just looking at their kind of wins and losses, it's not like they're giving up a whole lot of runs, but I'm not seeing them also score a lot of runs. I think they're kind of hovering around the 3 to 4 runs per game mark, and I think that is going to need to go up to about 5 or 6 runs per game if they want to make a push at the Diamondbacks' first place record.
Well, yes, and we saw a little bit of this last year where the Dodgers were not this bad, though, but the Dodgers always seem to play better, and once it hits June, that's when they kind of start hitting their stride. So if people can remember last year, the Dodgers were behind Diamondbacks for most of the season, and then they obviously went on that torrid run in a 50-game stretch going 43-7 and absolutely obliterated the rest of the NL West. So I do believe that Dodger team is still here. That obviously there wasn't much turnover from the World Series team that went last year. So I do think that they will eventually get better. I just think right now they're in that limbo at the beginning of the season. I also think the loss of Justin Turner in the middle of that lineup has affected this team a little more than I think a lot of people thought. And I do believe that once he comes back, although there is no timetable because I don't even believe he's started to hit yet, I don't think they'll be in this slump anymore. I think the lineup will kind of fill out. I also think the addition of Matt Kemp has kind of thrown the whole lineup off a little bit, just because he wasn't one of those guys that was on the team last year, wasn't in the big World Series run. So I do think this team will get better, but I think right now, if you're a Dodger fan, you kind of know April and May, you're hoping that the Lakers or the Kings or the Ducks or whatever are in the playoffs because the Dodgers don't necessarily play as well. And at least the Angels are playing well for people like us here in Southern California that actually have 2 teams to watch, you do have the Angels playing well. So just a final thought real quick, because we do have a little bit more time on the clock.
I was going to say, quickly, talk to me about Walker Buehler. I was just reading a little bit about him, and it says that he threw 99 miles per hour 8 times.
Yeah, Walker Buehler has been, I think he's the top prospect in the Dodgers organization right now. He came out for one game to pitch for one of the injured pitchers for the Dodgers, and he looks great. He's throwing as hard as Ohtani does, hitting high 90s. He played a little reliever in the playoffs last year at the end of the season. And yeah, he's one of the Dodgers' top pitching prospects. And I think this shows you that organizational depth of them. It's like, you know, they're not playing well right now, but they still have guys, and eventually this team will start to pick it up. So that's 5 minutes on the clock, so we'll switch topics. Let's switch to the NHL. The Ducks and Kings severely disappointed in the playoffs this year. Both teams getting swept. One by the Golden Knights, that was the Kings, and the other by the San Jose Sharks. And not only did they both get swept, but they only scored 4 goals the entire time. Both of them only scored 8 goals combined out of the two teams, and looked terrible. The Ducks looked a lot worse than the Kings did, but doesn't matter because they both got swept. And as a big hockey fan and someone that really kind of jumped on this season because I thought these two teams were both kind of back to their... well, I shouldn't say they did that with the Ducks, but the Ducks got to the Western Conference Finals last season. But I did think it was going to be one of those years where the Kings and Ducks really played well and they both got deep into the playoffs. They did the exact opposite of that. To say I'm disappointed is a complete understatement. I mean, it was boring to watch some of the games because they just could never score and never get into it. And something needs to happen. I think the Ducks need to fire their coach, Randy Carlyle, because that's a team that I think has more talent than the Kings and has more talent than the San Jose Sharks, who they got swept by, and they looked terrible. And like I mentioned, I thought this might be one of the final real runs for the Ducks. I think they're going to have to do a lot to get back in that that Stanley Cup final picture. I think they'll still make the playoffs, but something needs to happen to the Ducks. And I think the Kings weren't supposed to make the playoffs, so although it is disappointing that they got swept, but all the games were close, and I think Vegas is a good team. They surprised a lot of people. They surprised the Kings with their defense in the series. And I believe that the Kings just need to add a little more scoring depth on their team like they've needed the last couple of years. And I think their young dudes will play better. And I also believe, obviously, they need to re-sign Drew Doughty because Drew Doughty is one of the best players in the NHL, and that needs to be a top priority as well. But I don't think any coaching changes need to happen with the Kings, because I think they kind of overexceeded expectations the way making playoffs. Jared, what's your take on the Ducks and Kings?
Right, yeah, no, for Randy Carlyle, you're right. I think that he doesn't need to be fired. He's going to be 62 coming up on this next season. And it's kind of been like up and down. Obviously, this year they lose horribly in the first round. But the 2016-2017 season, they go to the Western Conference Finals. And, you know, they basically have the same nucleus of core players.
Same team, yeah.
Right, with Perry, Getzlaf, and Kessler. And I think that's another thing that this team needs to focus on is getting a little bit younger. All 3 of those guys, I believe, are over the age of 30. I think they have like 10 or 11 guys on their roster that are over the age of 30. And that's another thing with this playoff series against the Sharks is I think they looked slower. They didn't look as fast. And I think that obviously hurt them. So I think this offseason, should be one of their main goals, is getting younger. And I was reading a little bit, obviously because I don't follow the Ducks team or hockey in general as much, so I had to do a little bit more research. But I was reading that they were saying the Ducks farm system isn't as good. It's basically mediocre at best.
Yeah, it's not.
So how, if you're looking to get younger, is that specifically through the draft? Is that through free agency? Or, in your opinion, what's your take on how this team can get younger?
Well, yeah, they've kind of like maxed out their top prospects. They're all on the roster now. And it's guys like Andre Kasha who are really good, and Hampus Lindholm has come up. He's played the last couple of years. I do think they might need to... I don't want to say they need to trade one of the top 3 guys. I think that's going a little too far. But maybe... get some cap space, maybe add some guys to free agency. I do think obviously they need to do a good job in the draft, but they don't have a good draft pick. obviously make the playoffs and all. So they're going to be in that kind of mid-round hell. But I do think they need to do as much as they can to get younger. Because, like I mentioned with the Kings, although they didn't look good, they are younger. They have guys like Alex Iafallo and Adrian Kempe who really stood out and played well. They have a good young defense core coming up, and they have a guy named Gabe Vilardi who they drafted last year who was an absolute stud for his junior team this year and looks like he's going to be a top player in the NHL when he comes up. So I do think the Ducks need to get younger, and I do believe you do need to go into free agency, but also maybe trade up or trade down the draft, get as many picks, compile as many picks as you possibly can. All right, that's 5-minute mark. So we're going to switch to the NCAA. So Jared, I want you to explain this one because I don't know as much about this one. Possibly an age limit coming for NCAA players in basketball.
Right. There's a lot going on with this topic. And the biggest thing as far as college basketball and the NCAA is concerned is doing away with the one-and-done rule. And for those who don't know, the one-and-done rule is basically if you are an incoming freshman playing for any, it doesn't have to be Division I, any college, you basically only have to play 1 year, be eligible for 1 year, and then you are then eligible to enter the NBA draft. There have been good things about this, but mostly more negative than good. As far as there have been players who go to college programs knowing that they are good enough to get into the NBA.
Yes.
So, for one, they aren't really going to class and or aren't studying. They're getting other people to do their work for them because they just don't care. I mean, listen, if I was an 18-year-old athlete stud and I knew that I was going to go into the NBA and start making millions of dollars, what is the incentive to go to college and go to class for just 1 year, right? To me, I'm not saying that it's right, but I think I somewhat understand why a lot of these athletes are more or less just focused on basketball and not necessarily in the classroom. Number two, for these programs, it's getting tougher and tougher for them to recruit because every year they're having to go out and recruit the top athletes because guys aren't staying. 10, 15 years ago, when you had athletes who were staying throughout their junior and most likely their senior year, the recruiting process wasn't as difficult for these coaches in these programs, and you could take your time and have more of an opportunity to kind of build these players not only on the court, but they can grow as men as well. Nowadays, it's kind of like, all right, every year, okay, we have one group of guys, then they leave, and the next year we have to get another group of guys to come in. It's becoming such a process and such a hassle. Obviously, these programs are willing to do it, but at what cost? And that's where the other side of this comes in with the briberies and the cash payments to these players and the shoe deals and all these other things that are illegal, but that are being done under the table to get these top recruits to come play for these programs. So there are multiple different avenues that go into this. It's not just about the one and done rule. I feel that college football has more of a handle on how to deal with this. In college football, you have to be at least a junior before you can enter the NBA draft.
Yeah.
And that's a junior in academics. So you could technically be a redshirt sophomore athletically, but you have to be at least a junior in your academics before you can apply.
For example, Sam Darnold.
Yes,
Sophomore,
exactly.
yeah.
And I think that makes a lot more sense for these athletes on two fronts. Number one, they're more mature. Instead of being an 18, 19-year-old kid and handing them millions of dollars, they're now 20, 21 at least, and hopefully a little more mature. On the other front, they have also completed at least 3 years of their college academic career. So if they do have the opportunity to go pro and, say down the road, a couple years down the road, they want to come back to college and finish their degree, I think there's more of an incentive for them to do that because they only have 1 year left.
Sure.
For me, if I knew that I only had 1 year left as opposed to 3, that's going to be a lot easier for me to want to go back and finish my career.
Well, yeah. Plus, if you say were to get injured or something in that last year, I'm gonna finish my degree, so I'm gonna have my degree at least.
Right.
And that helps. Obviously, you still want to make the NFL. Or
of course.
But there's that actual fact that you wouldn't have to go back to college, let's say when you're 30 or whatever. So, I do think it's good. It's good and bad because it's funny to me why the NBA really even necessarily cares what the age is. Like, if players are 18 and they're well enough to play, I don't know why the NBA cares. I think they want a good front with the NCAA. But the NCAA does need to figure out the stuff with the NCAA basketball because they have all those problems with the boosters and all that stuff and the guys getting paid and Adidas and Nike giving people shoes and even recruits, having prostitutes given to them and stuff like that. So I do think something needs to change, and whether it be a 20-year-old limit or whatever it is, maybe that's it. I don't know. I think it's a little harder with basketball because they can kind of play when they're at a younger age. Okay, so last 5-minute segment, moving on. We move on back to the NFL. All comes full circle.
Right.
So Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski, you would probably say they're pretty good players, right, for the New England Patriots?
I'd say so.
So they've kind of been in limbo this offseason with whether they're going to play. And if you can remember, Gronkowski said after the Super Bowl that he really doesn't know. He was thinking about even before the season that he didn't know if this was going to be, if he wanted to play anymore. And we see him out here doing, what was he doing the other day? Gronk, was he riding dirt bikes or something like that?
Oh, he was.
Yeah. And they kind of asked him, what did the Patriots say? And he's like, I don't really care. Or no, they asked him if he's going to go to the OTAs or whatever, and he's like, no. He's just like, no, I'm not going. So I think now with him, I heard something that he's going to come back. But Tom Brady, there's some weird speculation that there's only a 75% chance he plays. I don't know where this is coming from. Jerry, can you explain to me where this is coming from? This Tom Brady all of a sudden might not play next year?
I think this one is a little more interesting than Gronk. I think Gronk, like you mentioned, he has come out and said to reporters that he is going to play. I think for Tom Brady, listen, he's at that 40-year mark.
Yeah.
He's 40, so it's not like he's a young spring chicken coming into the league, right? He's won his Super Bowls. He's put in his time. I think really this is his family that is coming out and saying,
hey, Gisele's
maybe
this.
I think so. I think she's finally saying, listen, what more do you have to prove? We have all the money in the world. You've won 5 Super Bowls. Obviously, Brady's a very, very competitive guy, so I think he still wants to continue to play, and I think he will. I don't think he's going to hang it up, but I think he's just taking more time to think about it. He now has kids, so he has a full family. There's other factors that come into this other than just his own body now, right? The dedication and the work that Tom Brady puts in to an NFL season is a lot different than most other athletes. So his family obviously is the main culprit of that, and they don't get to see him a lot. So is that something that he's willing to go through again? I think a lot of these factors he's sitting and trying to figure out right now. Do I want to be away from my family again and put my best foot forward and all of my energy towards this NFL season? So like I said, I think he's going to play. I'm sure Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft will sit down with him and not convince him, but just feel him out and see, hey, where are you? I do think that Brady is kind of on a year-to-year basis now. I think it's basically every year, how does my body feel? How do I feel? How does my family feel? At best, I think he has 2 more years. I think he's going to play this year. I think next offseason he's going to do the same thing. He's going to reevaluate how he feels and go from there. But I think at best he has 2 more years, which is why in the first segment when we were talking about the draft, I think the Patriots have to set themselves up for the future by drafting a quarterback.
Yeah, you just stole everything I was going to say.
Oh, sorry, man.
About Tom Brady. I do think this is with him not fully just announcing he's coming back, this might be the first sign that Brady is not necessarily healthy enough to play a ton of more years. What do you say, 5 more years or whatever?
You're right.
I think you're right. 1 or 2 years is the absolute maximum for him. I do think that I make jokes about this, that when we saw him try to catch that pass in the Super Bowl, he did not look like a 30-year-old guy, and he did not look like his diet has been working the way he wanted to work. Because he looked slow, and he looked like my dad trying to catch a football in an NFL game. That's nothing against my dad, but my dad is almost 60, and so it's Brady's he's just age is finally catching up with him, and obviously I think if there's any injury to Brady, it just compounds the whole thing too. But you're right, his family could be getting to him a little bit. I do think he'll play next year, 100%. I think they're saying, 75%? It's 100%. Brady's going to play next year unless we don't know that he has some crazy torn ACL or something that nobody knew about or something. I don't know. But I do think it's still interesting. This Patriots, the whole dynasty, it kind of feels like it's not there anymore, right?
Starting to come to the end.
Yeah, it starts to feel like the Patriots aren't this dominating team that might make the Super Bowl every single year. So coming up on the end of the 5 minutes, any final thought about the Brady thing real quick?
Yeah, no, like I said, I think you're right. I think this is the last year or two of this Patriots dynasty. I think the interesting thing will be when Brady does retire, does Bill Belichick retire and leave as well?
I think he's got
There's been rumors that, when one leaves, the other's going to leave as well, and then it's going to be a complete overhaul of this team. So I think that's the next interesting dynamic to wait and watch for with this organization.
Interesting enough. All right, so let's move on to final thoughts. We still have a little bit of time. I'll start. I think my final thought is just I'm very excited for this draft tomorrow. Very excited because there's so many quarterbacks, and to see where they're all going to go, and there's so many teams that need quarterbacks and all this stuff. It just really is one of the best drafts I've seen in the last decade, probably. It's just there's so much behind it. It just seems like it's so funny. The NFL just seems to outdo itself with whatever they do every single year. Like the last couple Super Bowl games have been really, really good. This draft is going to be amazing. We've had a little bit more parity the last couple years with the Jaguars getting deep in the playoffs and the Bills making the playoffs and all this stuff. All these teams that we didn't expect to make the playoffs are making it. Last year also with the teams that won the division. Who thought the Vikings would win the division? Who thought the Saints would win the division? Who thought the Rams would be as good as they were? So I just think the NFL just keeps outdoing itself. I'm also interested to see how Dallas receives this whole draft. What they're saying is 300,000 people are going to show up to this thing.
This is going to be the biggest draft. The most people attending the draft.
Yeah.
In NFL's history.
Well, I don't even know how that's going to work because doesn't Cowboys or AT&T Stadium only hold like 120,000 people?
Right, but then I think they're also considering the people that are going to be outside. I don't know. It's
going to be nuts.
It's
going to be nuts. I'll tell you this. I hope, and I know you don't want to see this, but the dude that called out that did the Cowboys thing in the second round.
Oh yeah,
announcement,
Drew
Pearson. You gotta think with Philly winning the Super Bowl and them being in Dallas, they gotta get him back. They gotta say something,
they will.
Right?
Oh, they will.
So I'm just saying, there's a lot of good storylines coming in this draft. I'm very excited for the draft. Jared, I'll let you take it away with your final thought.
Yeah, my final thought, sticking with football, not necessarily the NFL, but with football. Michael Vick, newly retired, or I guess you could say within a year, newly retired Michael Vick, is now going to be the new offensive coordinator in a new football league that is called the Alliance of American Football.
Wow.
The AAF. This is the first that I'm hearing of this.
I have never heard of the AAF.
I haven't either. Supposedly, I don't know how many teams they have. I do know they will have a team in Atlanta, and they will be playing at Georgia State Stadium. It's interesting. They're going to have Brad Childress, who is the former Minnesota Vikings head coach. He's going to have a role with the team as well. Vic being the offensive coordinator. Vic stating that he's always had a passion for teaching and wanting to coach after his career, so he's getting his start there. I guess I'm surprised that who knows, I don't know if he wasn't offered an opportunity within an NFL organization or if he wanted to start with this new football league and then work his way up. So it should be interesting to see. I don't, I guess, have a whole lot of... I have a lot of doubt with this league. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But it should be interesting. Good to see Michael Vick staying, within or surrounding himself still with football. Obviously, after that huge scandal that basically ended his playing career for the most part, and gave his name or not his name.
Obviously,
yes, obviously. So it's good that he's in coaching, and I hope to see him actually in the NFL one day, because I think that's where he should be. I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong with this AAF, but it's not the NFL, and I don't think it ever will be. So hopefully he can be a coach in the NFL one day.
No, exactly. And I do think, as you hear the music, the podcast is going to come to an end pretty soon. This might be his kind of his first start to eventually becoming a college offensive coordinator or an NFL offensive coordinator. I think he's right there, right on the cusp. Hey, this has been the Cover 2 Podcast. Good show. We'll be talking NFL Draft next week. Once again, I'm Nick Vina.
I'm Jason.
And this has been the Cover 2 Podcast.